The doorbell rang at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. I was sitting in my living room, scrolling through my phone, when I heard footsteps on our front porch. Through the window, I glimpsed a woman I'd never seen before. Average height, brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, carrying what looked like a manila folder. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Zuleika Venn, and I'm 34 years old. I work as an office administrator at Henderson & Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm downtown. My husband Hector teaches high school math, and we have a 7-year-old daughter named Mina. From the outside, we probably look like the perfect suburban family, but looks can be deceiving. The truth is, I've been having an affair with Brady Lerner for the past 8 months. He's a regional sales manager at a competing firm, married with no kids, and everything Hector isn't. Confident, spontaneous, exciting. Where Hector is methodical and quiet, Brady is bold and charming. Where Hector comes home tired from dealing with teenagers all day, Brady takes me to nice restaurants and tells me I'm beautiful. I justified it to myself easily enough. Hector had become distant over the years, buried in his lesson plans and grading papers. He rarely complimented me anymore, rarely seemed to notice when I dressed up or tried something new with my hair. Our conversations had dwindled to logistics about Mina's schedule and household maintenance. I felt invisible in my own marriage. Brady made me feel alive again. That Tuesday afternoon, I was texting Brady about our plans for Thursday evening. I'd told Hector I had to work late for inventory when the doorbell rang. I quickly switched my phone to silent and slipped it between the couch cushions. Hector was in his home office, probably grading tests, and Mina wouldn't be home from school for another hour. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I could see the woman more clearly. She looked to be about my age, maybe a little younger, with kind eyes and a patient expression. She was well-dressed, but not flashy. A simple blue blouse and dark slacks, like she was coming from an office job. The manila folder in her hands had something written on it, but I couldn't make out what from this angle. "Can I help you?" I called through the door. "Are you Zuleika Venn?" she asked. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Yes, that's me." "My name is Ivy Lerner. I was hoping we could talk for a few minutes." Lerner. The name hit me like a physical blow. Brady's last name was Lerner. This had to be his wife. My heart started racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. There could be any number of explanations. Maybe she was here about something completely unrelated. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Brady had told me his wife was busy with her own career and social activities, that they barely talked anymore. He'd made it sound like their marriage was practically over already. "I'm sorry, but I don't think we know each other," I said through the door. "Actually, I think we have quite a bit to discuss," Ivy replied. "It's about my husband, Brady." The words hung in the air like a threat. I could feel sweat forming on my palms, but I wasn't ready to give up yet. Denial had served me well over the past 8 months. Whenever Hector questioned my late nights or weekend work commitments, I'd turned it around on him, accused him of being paranoid, of not trusting me, of trying to control my career advancement. "I don't know anyone named Brady," I lied. "Mrs. Venn, I have photographs." The folder. Of course she had photographs. In the age of smartphones and social media, privacy was an illusion. Brady and I had been careful, or so we thought. We met at discreet locations, used cash when possible, kept our communications professional sounding in case anyone saw them. But apparently, it hadn't been enough. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Hector emerging from his office. He was wearing his usual after-work attire, khaki pants and a polo shirt, his brown hair slightly mussed from running his hands through it while he worked. At 36, He was still handsome in a quiet, understated way. He had the kind of face that looked trustworthy, the kind of person parents felt comfortable leaving their children with. "Who's at the door?" he asked. "Just a salesperson," I said quickly. I was about to send her away. But Hector was already walking toward the door, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. He didn't look surprised or curious. He looked resigned, like he'd been expecting this. "Actually," he said, reaching for the deadbolt, "I think we should let her in." "Hector, what are you—" He opened the door, and Brady Lerner stepped into our foyer. She was smaller than she'd seemed through the peephole, but there was something solid about her presence, something unshakable. She looked at me with what might have been pity, then turned to Hector. "Thank you for agreeing to this," she said to him. "I know it's not easy." My world tilted sideways. They knew each other. Somehow Brady's wife and my husband had been in contact. The careful compartmentalization I'd maintained for months was crumbling in real time. "What is this?" I demanded. "What is this woman doing in our house?" Hector looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder, something final. "She's your lover's wife," he said quietly. The silence that followed Hector's words felt like it lasted forever, though it was probably only a few seconds. I stood frozen in our foyer, staring at my husband and this stranger who somehow knew my deepest secret. The manila folder in Ivy's hands seemed to pulse with threat. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, but my voice came out weaker than I'd intended. Ivy opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of me and Brady at Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant about 20 minutes from our neighborhood. We were sitting close together, his hand covering mine on the table. I remembered that night. It was 3 weeks ago, and I'd told Hector I was having dinner with my college friend Jessica to celebrate her promotion. "This was taken on October 15th, Ivy said calmly. "A Tuesday evening. According to your husband, you told him you were having dinner with a friend named Jessica." I looked at Hector, searching his face for some sign of the man I'd married, the man who used to trust me implicitly. But his expression remained neutral, almost clinical. "How long have you known?" I asked him. "About 6 weeks," he replied. "Ivy contacted me after she found some of your text messages on Brady's phone." 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, he'd known about my affair and said nothing. He'd continued our normal routine, making coffee in the morning, asking about my day, helping Mina with her homework, all while knowing I was betraying him. "Why didn't you say anything?" I whispered. "Because I wanted to be sure," Hector said, "and I wanted to handle this properly." Ivy pulled out another photograph, this one showing Brady and me walking into the Marriott downtown. Then another of us in his car, parked behind the shopping center near my office. Each image was time-stamped and dated, creating an undeniable timeline of our affair. "Brady doesn't know I'm here," Ivy said. "He thinks I'm at my book club meeting. I wanted to talk to you first, to give you a chance to end this quietly before I decide what to do about my own marriage." The reasonable tone of her voice was somehow more unsettling than if she'd been screaming at me. She was treating this like a business negotiation, not the destruction of 2 families. "Look," I said, trying to regain some control of the situation. "I know how this looks, but you don't understand the whole situation. My marriage, Hector and I have been having problems for years. We've grown apart. We barely talk anymore except about logistics and household stuff. I've been feeling invisible, like I don't matter to him." I looked at Hector, hoping to see some flicker of recognition, some acknowledgement that what I was saying was true. But his expression didn't change. "That doesn't justify adultery," Ivy said simply. "I'm not trying to justify anything," I lied. "I'm just saying that marriages are complicated. Sometimes people make mistakes when they're feeling lonely and unappreciated." "Mistakes?" Hector spoke up for the first time since his initial revelation. "Zuleika, this has been going on for 8 months. You've lied to me dozens of times. You've used our joint account to pay for hotel rooms and expensive dinners. You've involved our daughter by lying about where you were when you were supposed to be at her school events. This isn't a mistake, it's a deliberate pattern of deception. Our joint account. My stomach dropped as I realized what that meant. If Hector had been tracking our finances, he'd have a record of every cash withdrawal, every unusual expense. I'd been so focused on keeping the affair secret from him emotionally that I'd forgotten about the digital trail I was leaving. I can explain the money, I started, but Hector held up a hand. I don't want explanations, he said. I want this to end. Today. Ivy closed the folder and looked at me directly. I'm going to be honest with you, Mrs. Venn. I could destroy your reputation and your marriage with these photographs. I could send them to your employer, post them on social media, make sure everyone in your social circle knows what you've been doing, but I don't want to do that, especially because it would hurt your daughter. The mention of Mina made my chest tighten. In all my justifications and rationalizations, I'd somehow managed to avoid thinking too deeply about how this would affect her. She was 7 years old, in second grade, still innocent enough to believe that Mommy and Daddy would always be together. What do you want? I asked. I want you to end the affair immediately and completely, Ivy said. No more contact with Brady except what's absolutely necessary for work. I want you to commit to marriage counseling with your husband, and I want you to be honest with him about everything. No more lies, no more secrets. It was a reasonable request, more generous than I probably deserved, but something in me rebelled against being dictated to by this woman, against being backed into a corner and forced to make promises. And if I don't agree to your terms? I asked. Ivy's expression hardened slightly. Then I'll file for divorce from Brady and name you as the other woman in the paperwork. It will become public record. I'll also send copies of these photographs to your employer's HR department, since I believe Brady's company does business with yours. I imagine that would create some complications for both of your careers. The threat was delivered in the same calm, reasonable tone she'd used throughout the conversation, which somehow made it more frightening. This wasn't an emotional, wronged wife lashing out in anger. This was someone who had thought through her options carefully and was prepared to follow through on her ultimatums. I need time to think, I said. You have until Friday, Ivy replied. That's 3 days. If I don't hear from you by then, I'll assume you've made your choice. She handed me a business card with her contact information, then turned to Hector. Thank you again for agreeing to this meeting. I know it wasn't easy for you either. Hector walked her to the door, and they exchanged a few quiet words I couldn't hear. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with my husband and the wreckage of my secret life. After Ivy left, Hector and I stood in our living room staring at each other like strangers. The afternoon sunlight streaming through our windows felt too bright, too normal for what had just happened. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking in the backyard, the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Life was continuing around us, as if our world hadn't just imploded. How did she find you? I asked. She looked me up online after she found your messages, Hector replied. She wanted to know if I was aware of what was going on before she decided how to handle it. And you just agreed to help her? I agreed to meet with her because I wanted to understand the full scope of what you've been doing. He walked over to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. Do you want to see what I've discovered over the past 6 weeks? I didn't answer, but he opened the folder anyway. Inside were bank statements with highlighted entries, printed emails, photographs, and what looked like a timeline written in his neat handwriting. October 3rd, you said you were working late, but your car was parked at the Hilton for 3 hours, he read. October 10th, you claimed you had a work dinner, but you withdrew $200 cash that afternoon, and your location services showed you at Romano's with Brady. October 17th. Stop, I said. I get it. Do you? Hector looked up from the papers. Because I don't think you understand what you've put our family through. Do you know that Mina asked me last week why Mummy doesn't love Daddy anymore? She's 7 years old, Zuleika. She can sense the tension even if she doesn't understand what's causing it. The mention of our daughter made my chest tighten with guilt, but I pushed the feeling away. I'd gotten good at compartmentalizing over the past 8 months, at keeping different parts of my life separate, so I didn't have to confront the contradictions. "This isn't all my fault," I said. "We've had problems for years. You've been distant and cold. You never show affection anymore, never compliment me, never make me feel like I matter to you. I've been lonely in this marriage for a long time." "So you decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about it. I tried talking to you, but you're always busy with work or tired from dealing with your students. When was the last time we had a real conversation about anything other than Mina's schedule or paying bills?" Hector closed the folder and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "You're right that we've had problems, but instead of working on them together, you decided to find someone else to meet your needs while keeping me around to provide stability and financial security. That's not solving our marriage problems, that's using me." His words stung because there was truth in them, but I wasn't ready to admit that yet. I'd spent months justifying my actions to myself, building a narrative where I was the neglected wife who deserved better. It was easier than facing the reality of what I'd actually done. "It's not that simple," I said, "isn't it?" Hector sat down heavily on the couch. "Zuleika, I found out about your affair 6 weeks ago, and in that time, you've lied to me at least 15 more times. You've continued sleeping with Brady while coming home and kissing me goodnight. You've used our money to fund your relationship with him while complaining that I don't spend enough on date nights with you. If that's not using me, what would you call it?" I wanted to argue with him, to find some way to turn this around and make him understand that he bore some responsibility for pushing me away. But the evidence in his folder made it hard to claim the moral high ground. "What happens now?" I asked instead. "That depends on you," Hector said. "Ivy gave you an ultimatum, but I have my own conditions if you want to save this marriage." "What conditions?" "Complete transparency. I want access to your phone, your email, your social media accounts. I want to know where you are at all times. No more unexplained late nights or weekend work commitments. I want you to find a new job so you don't have to interact with Brady professionally. And I want you to tell Mina the truth about why things have been tense at home. You want me to tell our 7-year-old daughter that I had an affair. I want you to tell her an age-appropriate version of the truth, that Mommy made some bad choices that hurt Daddy's feelings, and that we're working on fixing our problems. She's already confused and scared by the tension in this house. She deserves to know that it's not her fault." The conditions felt overwhelming, like he was asking me to dismantle my entire life and rebuild it under his supervision. But what choice did I have? If I refused, both Hector and Ivy would follow through on their threats, and I'd lose everything anyway. "And if I agree to all of this, you'll forgive me?" I asked. Hector was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "I'm willing to try marriage counseling and see if we can rebuild trust, but I can't promise I'll be able to get past this. What I can promise is that I'll give you a chance to prove that you're serious about changing." Before I could respond, we heard the sound of Mina's school bus pulling up outside. In a few minutes, our daughter would walk through the front door, and we'd have to pretend everything was normal while we figured out how to move forward. "We'll talk more tonight after Mina goes to bed," Hector said, gathering up his folder of evidence. "But I want an answer about Ivy's ultimatum by tomorrow. I won't let this drag on any longer." I nodded, not trusting my voice. As I heard Mina's footsteps on the front porch, I tried to compose myself and prepare to act like the loving mother she deserved, even though I felt like I was falling apart inside. The front door opened, and Mina bounced in with her usual after-school energy, her backpack sliding off one shoulder and her dark hair escaping from its ponytail. "Mommy! Daddy! Guess what happened at school today?" I forced a smile and opened my arms for her hug, trying to push away the thought that this might be one of the last normal moments our family would have together. That evening, after Mina had gone to bed, Hector and I sat at our kitchen table with the folder of evidence between us like a physical barrier. I'd spent the afternoon trying to figure out how to salvage the situation, but every angle I considered led back to the same conclusion. I was trapped. "I've been thinking about Ivy's ultimatum," I said carefully. "Some of her demands are reasonable, but I don't think it's fair for her to dictate the terms of our marriage." Hector looked up from the papers he'd been reviewing. "What specifically do you object to?" "The part about marriage counseling. I mean, I'm willing to try it, but I think we should choose our own therapist instead of letting Brady's wife tell us how to fix our relationship." It was a small point, but I needed to feel like I had some control over the situation. For 8 months, I'd been living a double life, carefully managing both my marriage and my affair to maintain the balance I wanted. Now that balance was destroyed, and I was scrambling to find some way to influence the outcome. "That's fine," Hector said. "I can research therapists in our area. What about the other conditions?" "I'll end things with Brady," I said, though the words felt strange in my mouth. "But I can't just quit my job. We need my income, and it would look suspicious if I left suddenly." "Then you'll have to find a way to minimize contact with him." "I'll try, but we work for competing companies that do business together sometimes. I can't guarantee we'll never have to interact professionally." Hector's expression hardened. "Zuleika, you're already trying to find loopholes. This is exactly the kind of thinking that got us into this situation." "I'm not looking for loopholes," I protested. "I'm trying to be realistic about what's actually possible." "What's realistic is that you'll have to make some sacrifices if you want to save this marriage. Your relationship with Brady has to end completely. No phone calls, no text messages, no private meetings, no matter what excuse you come up with." The finality in his voice made something rebel inside me. I'd been feeling cornered and defensive all afternoon, and now I was starting to get angry. Why was I the only one who had to make sacrifices? Why was everyone acting like this was entirely my fault when Hector bore some responsibility for the problems in our marriage? "You know what?" I said, standing up from the table. "I'm tired of being treated like the villain here. Yes, I made mistakes, but this marriage has been broken for years. You've been emotionally absent, we never talk about anything meaningful, and you've made me feel invisible in my own home. Brady made me feel appreciated and desired for the first time in years. So this is my fault. It's both our faults, but you're acting like you're completely innocent, like you bear no responsibility for the state of our marriage." Hector stared at me for a moment, then pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something. "Do you want to know what I was doing 6 weeks ago when Ivy first contacted me?" he asked. "What?" "I was researching marriage counselors. I'd been feeling the distance between us too, and I was planning to suggest we get professional help. I even had a list of therapists who specialize in couples communication." He showed me his phone screen, which displayed a note titled "Marriage Counseling Options," with several names and phone numbers. The note was dated 6 weeks ago. I stared at the screen, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because the day after I made this list, Ivy called me and told me about your affair. Suddenly, I realized that what I thought was mutual drift was actually you pulling away because you'd found someone else." The timeline hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been justifying my affair by telling myself that Hector didn't care about our marriage, he'd been actively trying to figure out how to fix it. While I'd been sneaking around with Brady, my husband had been researching ways to reconnect with me. "I didn't know," I whispered. "Of course you didn't know, because you never asked. You decided I was the problem and found someone else instead of talking to me about what was wrong." I sat back down, feeling deflated. For months, I'd been the protagonist of my own story, the neglected wife who deserved better. But from Hector's perspective, I was something else entirely, a stranger who'd been lying to him while he tried to save their marriage. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. "I want you to stop making excuses and take responsibility for what you've done," Hector replied. "I want you to acknowledge that you had other options besides adultery, and that you chose the most destructive path possible." The words hung between us, and I realized this was a turning point. I could continue trying to justify my actions and shift blame, or I could face the reality of what I'd done to our family. The choice I made in the next few minutes would determine whether our marriage had any chance of surviving. "You're right," I said finally. "I should have talked to you about our problems instead of looking outside our marriage for what I thought was missing. I'm sorry." It wasn't a complete capitulation. Part of me still believed that Hector's emotional distance had contributed to our problems, but it was a start. And for the first time since Ivy had knocked on our door, I saw something soften in my husband's expression. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means more to me than you know." We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us processing the weight of what had been said. Finally, Hector spoke again. "I'll call Ivy tomorrow and let her know you've agreed to her conditions, and I'll start researching marriage counselors." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. The immediate crisis was over, but the real work of rebuilding our marriage was just beginning. The next morning, I woke up with the strange sensation that I was living in someone else's life. Everything in our bedroom looked the same. The blue comforter Hector and I had picked out together 3 years ago, the framed photo of Mina on her first day of kindergarten, the stack of books on my nightstand, but nothing felt familiar anymore. Hector was already up, probably making coffee and packing Mina's lunch like he did every morning. I could hear them talking quietly in the kitchen, their voices carrying the easy affection that had somehow disappeared from my interactions with both of them over the past few months. I checked my phone and found 3 missed calls from Brady, along with a series of increasingly concerned text messages. "Hey, are you okay? You seemed distracted yesterday." I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. "Call me when you get this." "Zuleika, I'm starting to worry. Please just let me know you're all right." I stared at the messages, trying to figure out how to respond. According to Ivy's ultimatum, I was supposed to end all personal contact with Brady immediately. But we'd been involved for 8 months. I couldn't just disappear without any explanation. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on something brief and professional. "I'm fine. We need to talk today. Can you meet me for coffee at 10 a.m., the Starbucks on 5th Street? His response came back immediately. "Of course, see you there." I got dressed carefully, choosing a conservative blouse and slacks that would send the right message. This wasn't a romantic meeting. It was a business conversation about ending our relationship. Downstairs, Hector was helping Mina with her backpack while she chatted about a science project on butterflies. They both looked up when I entered the kitchen, and I was struck by how much they resembled each other. The same thoughtful brown eyes, the same way of tilting their heads when they were listening. "Good morning," Hector said neutrally. "Morning." I poured myself a cup of coffee and tried to act normal for Mina's sake. "How's the butterfly project coming along, sweetheart?" "Really good. Mrs. Peterson said I can bring in my chrysalis when it hatches. Daddy's going to help me make a special box for it." "That sounds wonderful." Mina finished her breakfast and ran upstairs to brush her teeth, leaving Hector and me alone in the kitchen. "I'm meeting Brady this morning to end things," I said quietly. Hector nodded. "Do you want me to come with you?" The offer surprised me. "Do you think that's necessary?" "I think it would be better if there's no ambiguity about what's happening. If I'm there, he'll understand that this isn't temporary." It made sense, but the thought of having my husband present while I broke up with my lover felt surreal. Still, if it would help convince Brady that I was serious, it might be worth the awkwardness. "Okay," I agreed, "but let me talk to him first. Give me 10 minutes alone with him, then you can join us." An hour later, I was sitting across from Brady at a small table in the back corner of Starbucks, trying to find the words to end our relationship. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. "You scared me yesterday," he said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "You've never ignored my calls before." I pulled my hand back gently. "Brady, we need to talk about us." Something in my tone must have alerted him, because his expression immediately became guarded. What about us? Ivy knows about the affair. The color drained from his face. What? How? She found some of our messages on your phone. She contacted Hector, and yesterday she came to our house with photographs and evidence. Brady was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. What did you tell them? I admitted everything. Ivy gave me an ultimatum. End the affair completely, or she'll file for divorce and make everything public. And you're just going to give in to her threats? The question surprised me. I'd expected him to be concerned about his own marriage, not encouraging me to defy his wife. Brady, she has photographs of us together. She has records of hotel visits and restaurant receipts. If this becomes public, it will destroy both our careers and our families. So we'll be more careful. We can find ways to see each other that don't leave a paper trail. I stared at him, realizing that we were having completely different conversations. I was trying to figure out how to end our relationship responsibly, while he was strategizing about how to continue it in secret. I don't think you understand, I said. This isn't about being more careful. This is about the fact that I've destroyed my marriage and hurt my daughter. I need to focus on fixing my family. What about us? What about what we have together? What we have is an affair, Brady. It was never going to be permanent. His expression hardened. Is that really how you see this? As just some temporary fling? Before I could answer, I saw Hector walk through the front door of the coffee shop. He spotted us immediately and approached our table with the same calm, methodical manner he brought to everything. Brady, he said, pulling out the empty chair and sitting down. I'm Hector Venn, Zuleika's husband. Brady looked between us, clearly trying to process this unexpected development. I don't understand what's happening here. My wife is ending your relationship, Hector said simply. We wanted to make sure there was no confusion about that. Zuleika, Brady looked at me pleadingly. Is this really what you want? I looked at my husband, sitting calmly beside me despite the fact that he was facing the man who'd been sleeping with his wife for 8 months. I thought about Mina, who deserved parents who were committed to their family. I thought about the evidence folder Hector had compiled, documenting months of lies and betrayals. Yes, I said. It's over, Brady, I'm sorry. He stared at me for another moment, then stood up abruptly. This is insane. You're making a huge mistake. Maybe, I replied, but it's my mistake to make. Brady looked like he wanted to say something else, but Hector's presence seemed to discourage him. Instead, he walked away without another word, leaving my husband and me sitting alone at the small table. How do you feel? Hector asked. I considered the question. I felt sad about losing the excitement and validation that Brady had provided, but also relieved that the constant deception was over. Mostly, I felt uncertain about what came next. Like I'm starting over, I said finally. We both are, Hector replied, but at least now we're starting from a place of honesty. 3 weeks later, I thought the worst was behind us. Hector and I had started marriage counseling with Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a therapist who specialized in rebuilding trust after infidelity. The sessions were difficult and emotionally draining, but they felt productive. We were finally talking about the problems in our marriage that had existed long before my affair. I'd had no contact with Brady since our meeting at Starbucks, though I'd heard through office gossip that he'd taken a leave of absence from his job. Ivy hadn't contacted me either, which I took as a good sign. Maybe she was satisfied that I'd kept my end of our agreement. Then, on a Friday afternoon, everything fell apart again. I was at work when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Hector's number, but when I answered, it was Ivy's voice on the line. Mrs. Venn, this is Brady Lerner. I'm calling from your husband's phone because I need you to come to the law office of Mitchell & Associates immediately. Do you know where that is? My blood went cold. Why are you with my husband? What's going on? There's been a development in my situation with Brady. Your presence is required for a legal matter. The address is 425 Commerce Street, Suite 200. How quickly can you get here? I don't understand. What kind of legal matter? Mrs. Venn, I strongly suggest you come immediately and bring any documentation you have regarding your financial accounts. This affects you directly. The line went dead. I sat staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Why was Ivy with Hector at a law office? What kind of development could require my immediate presence? I told my supervisor I had a family emergency and drove across town to the address Ivy had given me. Mitchell and Associates occupied the second floor of a modern office building downtown. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where I found Hector, Ivy, and a man in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit. Zuleika, Hector said when I walked in. This is David Mitchell, Ivy's attorney. I shook the lawyer's hand, noting his firm grip and direct gaze. Everything about him suggested competence and authority. Please sit down, Mrs. Venn, he said, gesturing to an empty chair. We have some serious matters to discuss. I sat down across from Ivy, who was wearing a navy business suit and had her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked nothing like the gentle, reasonable woman who had visited my house 3 weeks ago. This version of Ivy looked like someone who was prepared for war. I thought we had an agreement, I said to her. We did, she replied. You agreed to end your affair with my husband and work on your marriage. I agreed not to make your relationship public or contact your employer. And I've kept my end of the bargain. I haven't spoken to Brady since that day at Starbucks. Ivy opened a folder and pulled out a stack of papers. That's true. However, there are some complications you weren't aware of. She slid the first document across the table to me. It was a bank statement for an account I didn't recognize, but my name was listed as a co-owner, along with Brady's. What is this? I asked. It's a joint savings account that Brady opened in both your names 6 weeks ago, David Mitchell explained. He deposited $50,000 into it, money he embezzled from his company's client accounts. The room started spinning. That's impossible. I never opened any account with Brady. He used forged documents with your signature, Ivy said. The bank has security footage of him making the deposits, and there are email communications between the two of you discussing plans to use the money. She handed me printouts of emails that appeared to be from my account to Brady's. The messages talked about our future together and the nest egg we're building, but I'd never sent these emails. I didn't write these, I said desperately. Brady must have hacked my account or created fake emails somehow. That's what we thought initially, David Mitchell said. But the FBI's cybercrime unit has confirmed that these messages originated from your computer's IP address. FBI. The word hit me like a physical blow. The FBI is involved in this. Embezzlement of $50,000 from client accounts is a federal crime, the lawyer explained. Brady's company discovered the missing money 2 weeks ago and reported it to the authorities. When they traced the funds, they found the joint account with your name on it. I looked at Hector, hoping to see some sign that he believed in my innocence, but his expression was unreadable. Hector, you have to know I didn't do this, I pleaded. I would never steal money or commit crimes. I want to believe you, he said quietly. But the evidence is pretty compelling. Ivy pulled out another document, a rental agreement for an apartment across town. Again, both my name and Brady's were on the lease, with a move-in date scheduled for next month. Brady rented this place 2 weeks ago, she said. According to the landlord, you were supposed to move in together after you both left your spouses. That's not true. I never agreed to leave you, Hector. I've been working on our marriage, going to counseling, doing everything we agreed on. Then how do you explain this? Ivy asked, sliding a final document across the table. It was a resignation letter addressed to my supervisor, dated for next Friday. The letter cited personal reasons for my departure and requested that my final paycheck be mailed to the apartment address on the rental agreement. I didn't write this either, I said, but my voice was barely a whisper. The evidence was overwhelming, creating a narrative where I was planning to run away with Brady and the stolen money. David Mitchell leaned forward. "Mrs. Venn, the federal prosecutor is prepared to file charges against both you and Brady for conspiracy to commit embezzlement. However, given that you appear to be the secondary party in this scheme, they're willing to consider a plea agreement if you cooperate fully with the investigation." "Cooperate how?" "Tell them everything you know about Brady's financial crimes. Provide access to all your electronic devices and accounts. Testify against him if the case goes to trial." I stared at the documents spread across the table, trying to understand how my life had spiraled so completely out of control. 3 weeks ago, I'd thought the worst consequence of my affair would be marriage counseling and some awkward conversations. Now I was facing federal criminal charges. "I need a lawyer," I said. "That's probably wise," David Mitchell agreed, "but I should warn you that the longer you wait to cooperate, the less favorable the plea terms are likely to be." I looked at Hector one more time, searching his face for some sign of the man who'd been willing to fight for our marriage just 3 weeks ago. But something fundamental had changed. The trust we'd been trying to rebuild was completely shattered. "I never stole any money," I said to him, "and I never planned to leave you and Mina. You have to believe me." Hector was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a familiar folder, the same one he'd shown me the day Ivy first came to our house. "6 weeks ago, I hired a private investigator to document your affair," he said. "I wanted evidence in case we ended up in divorce court. But the investigator found more than just proof of adultery." He opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs. They showed Brady entering and leaving a bank, carrying a briefcase. They showed him at an internet cafe, using a computer. They showed him meeting with a man I didn't recognize in the parking lot of a storage facility. "Brady has been planning this for months," Hector continued. "The embezzlement, the fake emails, the joint accounts, all of it was designed to frame you as his accomplice and give him leverage if he got caught." I stared at the photographs, finally understanding the full scope of Brady's deception. He hadn't just been having an affair with me. He'd been using me as an unwitting accomplice in a federal crime. "The man he's meeting in that last photo is a document forger," David Mitchell explained. "He's already been arrested and is cooperating with federal investigators. He's confirmed that Brady paid him to create fake signatures and identification documents using your personal information." The room was silent except for the sound of my own breathing. I felt like I was drowning in evidence and accusations, unable to find solid ground anywhere. "What happens now?" I whispered. "Now you decide whether you want to be a victim of Brady's scheme or an accomplice to it," Ivy said. "Because those are your only 2 options." I looked around the table at the 3 people who held my future in their hands: my husband, my lover's wife, and a lawyer I'd just met. None of them looked particularly sympathetic, but as I stared at the evidence of Brady's elaborate betrayal, I realized that my choice was actually very simple. "I'll cooperate," I said. "I'll tell them everything I know.